Welcome back, Howligans. Thank you for joining us for another riveting episode of Movie Howl. This time we are talking about Wolfman. This is a movie Ryan had picked out. Older, not ridiculously older. 2010, I believe you said.
Yep.
Which he blew me away with something yesterday. We were watching it, and Hugo Weaving happens to be a character in this movie, and he reminded me that it came out well after The Matrix, and it just, old. I'm old. It's
About
old.
10 years, 11 years after.
Holy cow, it's just disgusting. I don't even want to think about it.
The Matrix is so old. I didn't see it in theaters. It came with my PS2.
Shut up.
When I got my PS2, the Matrix DVD was bundled with it, and I remember watching it like that on the basement TV.
Wow.
Wow. It's like, this is a great movie. Why did I not see this?
The Matrix was the very first movie that I went and saw by myself. I was like, I want to see this, and I don't care if nobody can go. Fine, nobody can go. I'm going to go watch it. Blew me away. So, but we're not talking about that movie. We're talking about Wolfman, starring Benicio del Toro, Anthony Hopkins, Emily Blunt, and technically you've got Hugo Weaving in it. Those are probably
he's not one of the stars, but
he's not. But certainly one of the four biggest names in the movie. This was an interesting movie. It wasn't like it's a Wolfman movie. It's an
old school movie. Yeah, it's an old school monster movie. Apparently won an Oscar.
Really?
For best makeup.
Makeup, okay.
Best achievement in makeup, yeah. But it was nominated for a couple other things.
Interesting.
It only has a 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb. I'm looking at that right now, which I'm not totally surprised by, because it's not like perfect. It's not a perfect thing where everything is paced perfectly and all the reactions are perfect, but it's a monster movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real monster movie with like a body horror transformation, like actual bad guys, actual good guys, like a victim kind of caught in the middle of it. They just don't do that kind of thing anymore. You kept saying that. It's like, they just don't do this anymore. Like, even 10 years ago, it wasn't. I mean, it was maybe more common because you had stuff like Pan's Labyrinth and this and whatever, and they tried to do whatever, I, Frankenstein, and then they did The Invisible Man and stuff like that. But they were trying to build up to a cinematic universe, because that was kind of when everybody was realizing, like, you have guaranteed money if you can build in a fan base for this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they did. They tried that. I, Frankenstein, Dracula 2000, The Mummy, or Mummy, whatever it was, with Tom Cruise, trying to build that universe.
Yeah,
which could have been interesting if you pull it all together. I think that there is some potential there, but there's only real potential there if it is well written and well done. Otherwise, this movie, it's just a standalone, and that, I guess that's what struck me the most about it compared to what they do nowadays. Everything is a franchise. You can't do anything. Like, there's another Despicable Me movie that just came out. There's another Kung Fu Panda movie that's going to come out. Like, are they going to do another Shrek movie? Like, what can we not come up with different ideas that aren't just doing the same thing again? A movie I've been thinking about lately is Freddy Got Fingered. How did that even get made in 2001? That movie is so bizarre. Because so dumb. And then it has moments that was popular at that point.
Yeah, Tom Green had this this moment, and I watched a review of it by Red Letter Media a while ago, where they were like, it's almost like he got lost a bet and had to make a movie and didn't really know what to do with it. He somehow just wound up in this position. But yeah, it's like they used to take chances on stuff like that every once in a while. Some of the best movies we've had came from that, I feel like. And I was watching what is it called? Second Wind. They're on YouTube. It's the guys who used to do The Escapist. Somebody bought The Escapist, like the website and YouTube channel, whatever, and started firing a bunch of people. And so, like, basically all the people who did the YouTube stuff left and started their own thing. So, like, Yahtzee and the guys who wrote all that stuff, like, they all moved on and did their own thing. But anyway, it was one of their videos where they were talking about cargo cults. So everybody's probably heard this story. They went way in depth with it, more so than they probably needed to. But during World War II, the Allies created bases on some of these little islands with uncontacted tribes on them, and they would drop supplies, and the military people would share like the clothing and food and whatever with the natives. And then after the war, they destroyed the bases and left. And they came back like 40 years later, 50 years later, and they are building like fake airplanes and runways and trying to rebuild the base and do these things to like summon these supplies, this cargo from the sky. It's almost like a religion. And what they were trying to say with this was a lot of game developers in particular they were talking about are copying aspects of other games without understanding the mechanics of it. Oh, Breath of the Wild was really popular. Maybe it's the climbing mechanic. Let's copy that without understanding how that played into anything else, or like, how formed your strategy or your experience with exploring that world. Or like the RPG aspect of the newer Assassin's Creed games minus Mirage, since they kind of went back to a little bit closer to basics with that. And I feel like it's the same with movies. They all copy things that have worked with previous movies, including characters, names, locations, humor styles, all that kind of stuff. Like they're all just copying things, just aspects of other movies without understanding why that worked for them. And they're not trying anything original.
I do think that's something that Hollywood has done for a long time when it came to sequels. It was very rare that a sequel was better than the first movie, than the original starting of a series. There are some examples that you could potentially give where the sequel was better. Star Wars is a good example of that. Empire Strikes Back, maybe the preeminent example of that. But
first one I thought of.
Yeah, but generally what happens is, and you could see this, the first thing that popped into my mind was Austin Powers. Or you could say Anchorman, or you could say certain movies where what they do is like, oh, this thing worked really well, and people liked these jokes, they liked these characters, they liked and so let's just take that and double everything. It's like, oh, you liked this movie that had explosions and car chases. Well, we're going to give you twice the amount of car chases and 3 times the amount of explosions. And then it's obviously going to make this requisite, or commiserate amount of money as well. Like, and that's not how it works.
I think the big cargo cult copying thing that a lot of movies have done, especially with Marvel and just superhero movies in general, is the humor. Well, what is his name? Taika Waititi.
Oh, okay. I didn't know he was.
My brain was like, forget. Yeah, he's from isn't he from New Zealand? He has a New Zealand accent.
Okay.
Yeah, New Zealand.
So yeah, that's a perfect example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, he did stuff because he's just kind of goofy and he likes making that kind of movie. Like he likes having that kind of humor, and he did it with, I would say probably Ragnarok is where he did it with the most success. That seems to be the tipping point to where they went to jokes to diffuse any tension, any seriousness, any moment that would let you sit and kind of just be with the impact of something that happened, because they use it during moments where they really shouldn't. Thankfully, they held off on that with Infinity War and Endgame for the most part.
Yeah.
But there's so many times where they just keep doing this. It's like, well, Ragnarok did this and it was really successful. Let's just throw this humor all over every movie we do forever without understanding that it was, this bizarre, colorful world where it kind of fit and it helped bring some humanity to Thor instead of him being this like super stoic, serious. Like most of his humor before was him just not understanding things. Throwing the coffee cup down, being like another, like he's in a mead hall.
Right. Which worked for his character. But then when you took it to the lengths they did in Thor: Love and Thunder, it was terrible. Just they literally ruined the character. It could not see him the same, not okay. And when you talk about, having serious moments, letting it sit, not cutting it with this moment of levity, which sometimes that can be okay. When used correctly and sparingly, that can be all right. But kind of like in real life, sometimes a lot of people have a very hard time with just letting something be. Like they say something, maybe it's controversial or, something that they don't know how the reaction of the person they're talking to, how they're going to take it. And so instead of just letting it sit and you be quiet and let the other person respond to it, regardless of what that's going to be, but they don't do that. They start to talk and want to fill that gap of nothingness with something just to do it, just to defuse. I don't know how this is going to go over. But sometimes people just need to let things lie, and they don't need to fill that in between with something. I think that is a lot of people just do that. And one of the things that if you watch anything and if you want to be, about potentially, there you are, potentially like powerful people or successful, if you want to be successful in this and that and in business or negotiations and things, learning how to do that. Talk less, listen more. And I think it falls into that category of you do something in your movie or your TV show or whatever it is, or even a video game, something. And instead of trying to cut that important moment some way, you let it lay and you let it sit there and you just kind of, it's like when you drop a really good fart and it's really rough and you're like, oh, even I don't know. And then you're like, no, I'm just going to sit in it. I'm just going to ruminate. I'm going to accept it. It's kind of like that.
Well, that's great. All right. Should we get back into the Wolfman?
Yeah, let's Wolfman. Right. Wolfman.
All right.
This movie that was, it was not the best horror movie I've ever seen, but
it was
the changing from human to wolf, which was reminiscent of one of the most iconic versions of that, which is American Werewolf in Paris. I thought that was well done. I liked the characters. I liked what you mentioned about Benicio del Toro's character, and they threw in a little line about, I got shipped off to my aunt in America. And you were like, well, that explains his American accent because it's a period. They're in and around London, so where they are.
In 1891, and he's an actor, and he's interacting with all these people, and he just has this blatant American accent for the first 25, 26 minutes, and they never address it. And then he's just talking about like how awful his father was. He's like, he sent to an asylum for a year after my mother died. Then he shipped me off to America, which explains this accent and why like his family's like talks about having missed his brother's entire life. Like his brother disappearing is the inciting incident. It's what brings him back to Blackmore, the estate where Anthony Hopkins, his father, lives, who is, I think, fantastic. I would have just liked to watch a movie that was just him being him, doing his thing. I mean, I guess we can talk spoilers. It's a 14-year-old movie. Which to say. But he is a werewolf as well. Like we see that they eventually show you what the progression is, like who all the werewolves have been or whatever in this. There's not terribly many of them, but so good. Anthony Hopkins is so good. Like he just has these creepy moments. Like there's some where he's just, you see like what Benicio del Toro walks by a doorway and it's all dark and it's like the light changes. You can see the silhouette of Anthony Hopkins just standing in this dark room watching him. Or he passes Emily Blunt on the stairs and she's like, is everything okay? And he's just kind of eating an apple and staring at her.
Yeah, he doesn't respond at all, doesn't say anything.
Oh. And then he has moments where he seems really good, like where he's like where the guys come to get Lawrence, Benicio del Toro's character of Lawrence. They come to get him, and boom, you hear a gunshot, and like the head of the statue gets blown off, and he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, whoever. I was aiming for you." And he goes,
"It's not what it used to be." Yes.
Yeah. He's like, "You're on my land. My servant is up on the roof with a repeating rifle, and he's a good shot. He'll kill 8 of you before he even has to reload. And he wasn't even there. And then he goes to Lawrence. He's like, "You thought you're the only one that could act," or something like that. Or you're not the only one. But yeah, there are a lot of good moments in this. And it's not perfect, but it's like it was really refreshing because I've had it for a while. I think I probably got it during like a Black Friday thing because I like I like being part of the chaos on Black Friday. I like going out. When it's real bad, I like going out and seeing what's happening. I like watching the like mosh pits that form. But I don't really buy anything. There's like nothing that I usually want.
Is that a thing that even happens anymore now?
I feel like it doesn't. No, I feel like it doesn't.
Not like it was several years ago, like pre-COVID. Pre-COVID Black Friday was that, what you're describing. I just don't think it's the way it is the way it used to be. It's not like that anymore.
No, it's not. But one of the things I would do is if I saw a movie, it's like, oh, The Wolfman, I'll grab that, or The Town, or whatever. There's a lot of movies that I bought where it's like, oh, I've heard about this. I'll just grab the Blu-ray. It's like $4 today. But yeah, this was one that I just grabbed off the shelf and put on one day while I had some time to kill, and I enjoyed it enough to tell you about it. Because again, it just feels like a good palate cleanser, and I like that the transformation is scary. I like that it's not just a quick like, poof, now I'm a werewolf, and I can do it whenever I want, and I can control myself, and I can do this stuff like Teen Wolf back in the day.
I was going to say Teen Wolf. It's not Teen Wolf style?
No, it's not that.
I was getting ready to say that. That's crazy.
Or was it Teen Wolf, and then there was an older one called Big Wolf on Campus. I don't even remember what network that was on.
Never even heard of that.
It was the same kind of thing. It was like a really low budget version. It was like a Monster of the Week kind of thing, like think Power Rangers and Beetleborgs and stuff like that. It was kind of that sort of thing. Okay. But yeah, it was. He had he in his everyday life became stronger, faster, more agile. He was already an athlete, but he became like a way better basketball player, football player, whatever it was that he did. Like he got the girl,
like Peter Parker and Spider-Man. The Amazing Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah. But in this, it's like he's a normal guy, and then he's a normal guy who has this curse and this thing, and he knows that he's going to do terrible things and people are going to die, and he's scared of it, and he wants somebody to end it. And that's so much better than him being like this misunderstood villain who's just like, no, leave me alone. You don't understand. I can get, I'm okay. I can control myself. Like, no, he's a monster. It's a monster movie with an actual monster, not a sympathetic villain.
I like that Anthony Hopkins' character. He just they don't really explain when it happened, but at some point after he was affected, and they state when he was affected with the curse, but they don't really state when he became okay with it. Because there's a part where he's having a conversation with Lawrence about it. And he's just like, this is just what it is. I like living. I don't I know what I am and what I do is terrible. Like he killed his wife, and Benicio del Toro's character, Lawrence, as a child saw it, even though he didn't understand, I think. Like there was blocked memory. And that could potentially, we think, why he sent him to the asylum.
That's the implication, is he sent him to the asylum because he was saying, my father's a werewolf or a monster, and he killed my mother, and so they created these.
Nobody believes any of that, so it's just it just sounds crazy. I really liked how they went back to the asylum to start showing you kind of some of the stuff they did, and how that would be, because that seemed pretty horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not like the worst of asylum stuff that you've seen when you're talking about that time period stuff, but it wasn't great, and so I liked how they showed that. I liked that scene when they pull Lawrence out in the middle of this gallery of doctors and maybe professors and things.
Yeah.
And you've got the lead man at the asylum who's talking about he's got these delusions and he thinks he's going to turn into it.
He's basically Hugo Strange from Batman. From the DC comics. He very much reminds me of that character, but he's we'll see. But he's no more likely to turn into a werewolf at the full moon than I am to sprout wings and fly out this window, whatever it is that he says.
That was great because he did, and he killed a bunch of people, and it was great. Like that.
And then he threw him out the window. He did fly out the window.
That's what you want out of your monster movie. It gave you some of the things that you wanted. There was some gore. It wasn't like you're not watching this to be scared. It wasn't, there's no jump scares. There's no whatever trope you think of in scary movies. I'm sure there are people who could potentially like the transformation you said, a little gruesome.
There's some good ones. I mean, there's like when they're first at the gypsy camp and the villagers come and they're like trying to get this bear. They assume it's this bear that they have. It's like a performance animal.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to get the bear. And while the bear is there, like people are getting attacked around it. And there's like a dude standing there with a torch. And you hear this noise and then boom, it's like he gets hit by a truck. And all that's left are like embers that float down. Like that was a good one.
Yeah.
There were a couple good ones there where it's like suddenly a person is like injured and they don't know how because this thing is just tearing through there so fast and it's, England in a moor and it's dark and it's foggy and
even the moments are not like what I think of as the horror movie jump scares, like Five Nights at Freddy's jump scare things like they try to do.
There's a couple. There's like dream sequences and stuff where something pops out. But yeah,
I thought they were decent. It was a decent horror movie. Like I liked the actors. I liked the way it was portrayed. I like period piece movies in general, and so the fact that it was one of those, I enjoyed that. Emily Blunt, she's always great. She played a decent character in this. I liked the fact that she was in relation to what's going on in the storyline. For those who would like to know, in the very, very beginning of the movie, you see somebody get killed by a werewolf. He's running or he's looking for something, and he's got this lantern. He's in a forest, and all of a sudden he comes upon something, and it almost straight disembowels him. And then he starts running away, and then it catches him, and he's dead. So he gets killed. Well, he is her husband, which is Lawrence's brother. And so that's how all this kind of, that's how Lawrence gets involved. She contacts him. But then when Lawrence gets cursed, and now he has to deal with this, she is doing things to try and help. She's going to the gypsies. What can I do? And she's trying to figure out ways that she can be a part of this. And like she's, looking at old texts, trying to actually, do a little research and figure out things she can do to help. And I appreciated that about her character.
Yeah, I liked something that I didn't think about until last night watching it again was how in a lot of these movies where there's like Walking Dead, there's no concept of zombies before that. Right? They behave as though there was no idea of that happening before.
Okay.
Right? It's not like a pop culture thing because they don't know what to call them. They call them walkers.
Oh, like maybe. Like I never really watched Walking Dead or the comics.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
The comics in the show, there was no real indication that they had a concept of that before it actually happened in their universe. And I feel like a lot of these movies kind of do that where it's like, this thing is happening, but they don't have like a preconceived notion of a vampire or a werewolf or a mummy or whatever else that's going on. But in this one, there's a moment where she's like, "Oh, if this is real, then anything can be real. God, magic, whatever, it's all real." So that's when she starts digging through stuff that she probably thought was worthless before, like books about lycanthropy and curses and the gypsies and whatever else. And I appreciate that. It kind of grounded it a little bit in a way.
You know what?
For me?
You know what other movie and this other movie, admittedly, I like it a lot more than I liked this movie, just in terms of general entertainment value, was From Dusk Till Dawn. Mm-hmm. When they came to the realization that, oh, these are vampires. Oh, it's a vampire now? And then they had that conversation. What do we know? What do we know about vampires? What's the BS that we know? What's the real things that we've actually seen work here in this situation? And they did that. It wasn't like, oh, what's going on? We don't know what any of these things are. It wasn't that. Like, you mentioned with The Walking Dead. It's, oh, no, these are vampires. We know what vampires are because that's a pop culture thing. But we just thought it was that. We just thought it was a fictional world. That's not a real thing. And now we're in the middle of this situation dealing with it. This is just an 1800s version of that.
Yeah, because they're all like, oh, silver bullets, werewolves, ha ha ha.
Right, yeah.
But then they start casting them. Like you see the villagers starting to like melt silverware and whatever and start casting silver bullets. You see Hugo Weaving pull out a box of them. You know, it's his inspector character. He loads his revolver. He gives them to somebody else. He loads his revolver, so they're ready to go. It's a nice touch. I like that there's not this like, let's figure out what this is and what's happening. It's like, oh no, werewolves are real. Okay, we're gonna make some silver bullets and give them to the cops.
Yeah, and there was a scene where as Lawrence is escaping the insane asylum, and I don't remember the character's name, but Hugo Weaving, he's like an inspector, I guess you would call it, detective that we would think of, in USA style. But there's a scene where he has all of his men kind of rallied up, and they're at the end of an alleyway or in an alley, and Lawrence is like running at them as a werewolf, and they've all got their guns, they've got their bullets, are ready to go, and I'm like, ooh, this is going to be potentially bad. But then you have to think about the fact that if you remember the movie, what is it? The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. When they're training the men and they're like, no, we need to go. We need to be. And he's like, these men aren't ready. And he goes, stands where the dummies are that they're being shot. And he has one guy stand there and he's telling them to shoot. And he's like, yeah, let's shoot it. And he shoots and he misses. Like in this case, Tom Cruise's character was a little crazy at that point. He kind of he didn't want to be a part of it anymore. So he was hoping he would hit him, but it missed. And so in the same kind of situation, these men who you think in a general setting, you have one enemy at the end of an alleyway coming at you and a line of you with guns, you feel like that's bad for the one. But because it's something they've never seen, never experienced, and these are not, I mean, who knows how accurate their implements are or how good they are with them, how often they've trained or, use them actually in, really in the line of fire, as they say, that probably a lot of that stuff just missed. And so he flies past him, hops over him, and he's out.
I mean, you see viewpoints where he gets hit, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's not
but nothing enough to like put him down. But I think it was after that point is when Hugo Weaving's character, because he saw it, like started casting the silver bullets, because they were just shooting at him with like regular armaments. But given that situation, and my first thought was, oh, this is going to be bad for him. He's going to get like really messed. He may survive, but really messed up. But he just got past them without any problem. And because of my preconceived notion of it, I thought he was going to get really almost put down by that. But then the more I thought about it, the more it actually made sense that he didn't, given, some of the reasoning that I've just put forth there. There were moments that was decent. This was a decent movie. It surprised me more than anything, given the state of Hollywood right now, that it had even got made. Like we mentioned in the very beginning of our discussion here, that, they used to just make movies. Like who just in 2010 was like, I want to make a werewolf movie. What? Like, what's the
feel like
reasoning behind it? You just wanted to make it. You just got these A-list.
Yeah.
I mean,
I feel like A24
A-list actors, and they're gonna throw together a werewolf movie just out of the blue. But it was fun. I don't know how well it did in the theater, how much money it made, any of that, but they did it, and I like that. I like that they just made the movie, and sometimes that's okay.
Yeah, I feel like A24 is the only one right now kind of doing different things, and that's probably why they're starting to become more prominent. Because I feel like I'm noticing A24 movies way more than I used to. And I feel like that's because they're the ones who are they're standing out because they're still doing what they were doing before, which is just making weird stuff, just doing things that are one-off. They're not, doing, let's do a 15th of this movie or whatever. And
like somebody has to figure that out, right?
More what we need.
Hollywood people like who want to make movies who understand the theme behind it. It's a term that is bandied about go woke, go broke, things like that. The line of that they understand that people just want not only to not be preached at, but they don't always just want sequels to things, that they're not afraid to try to do something different and new. And like there have to be those people out there. Look at the Godzilla movie that was made.
Godzilla -1, yeah. It was like $15 million that they made it for, and it tripled its money with a very limited release.
Yeah, and then absolutely blew up after that.
Yeah.
So, which I haven't seen yet. I do want to watch that as well. Maybe that's one that we could do and talk about. But yeah, there are people out there who do want to make movies just for the love of making movies. I feel like that's what it used to be about. It used to be about we want to make movies and we want to put, when you're doing something like that, I'd like to hope that everybody who does a job, whatever your job is, that you are to some degree putting your heart and soul into that job. Now, some jobs it's easier to do that with than others, like making a movie, where when you're a director, you have a specific vision for what you want, how you want it to turn out, how you want these actors to act it, how you want the special effects. You have your vision for what it is, and you're really doing that. You're kind of pouring yourself into this. And I do believe as the audience, most of us, I think people who care are going to be able to tell when you've done that. They're going to be able to watch that movie and be like, oh, you really wanted this to be this way, and it really works, and I can see what you were going for. Kind of like I mentioned to you last night when we hung out and we watched this, that I just played through Hogwarts Legacy. And within first 5-10 minutes of playing that game, I felt like, oh, excuse me, the people who made this, they loved the IP. They really love the world, they love the characters, and they're trying their best. And then issues here and there with it, but they really tried their best to deliver on the idea of that world. So I just hope that Hollywood can continue that trend. And I mean, trend right now, I don't know if it's so much of a trend right now. We're talking about a movie from 2010 as we're discussing this, but I would like to see more of that. I would like to see more of them say, I don't want to preach to you. I don't want to just do a sequel. And like we already talked about, we're gonna throw more of this at it because it worked in the first movie. So I'm gonna double those, do more of this because it's a sequel. And they're just gonna maybe try something different.
Yeah, see, I think another thing we talked about last night was finance and decision making for growing your money and doing things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I studied in school was essentially probability modeling, like figuring out how to replicate a result. And I feel like that's what most studios are doing now. Like they have somebody who has the knowledge that I have, probably a lot more in terms of this kind of math, but who goes through and creates some kind of big multivariate equation and says, okay, whenever we have more of this kind of character, more of this kind of joke, we can expect it to, one more joke correlates to, X percent more revenue or something like that. Like we can see a correlation between more or less revenue based on this. And maybe they're basing that on the first series of like the first what is it, like the main era of Marvel movies up to Endgame. So they're saying like, okay, humor works really well because it wasn't totally saturated with it back then, and that's why there was a big uptick when you had Ragnarok. Like the Thor movies didn't do great until you had some humor, but it still goes back to the idea that a lot of them are replicating aspects without understanding why they were successful. So I still think that's I think that the executives look at I'm looking at the numbers here. I'm looking at what, these guys that we hired to do this math are saying. They're saying statistically we should be coming out with a better return if we do this instead of doing your one-off monster movie or your one-off comedy, especially comedies. Comedies are just not the same anymore at all.
Nope.
I mean, you're never going to get a movie like Good Will Hunting again.
Well, I mean,
you would never get like
so yeah. Sorry,
but you're never going to get like a lot of those original movies. I mean, we're kind of getting. I mean, it's not like everything was perfect in the 90s. There were a lot. I have a lot of bad action movies on VHS and DVD that I've seen over the years that are like fine. They're fine. They're fine for background noise and stuff, but they do basically the same thing. They all make the same mistakes. They're all they're trying to replicate Die Hard and The Rock and things that have worked around that same era. There are a lot that are trying to replicate like Jean-Claude Van Damme movies and things like that, but they're just not the same. That's like all of what we have today are things trying to replicate what worked in the past without understanding why. But I think you just need to take somebody needs to be willing to take risks, but I don't know how that can happen.
Nope,
cinematic releases are no longer really a thing. Like you no longer have that 3-month period where like something can be in the theaters and make its money. There are so many like Glass Onion. I wanted to see in theaters, but it was only in theaters for like 1 week. I didn't even know that it was out until it was already gone and on to streaming. Like I would have preferred to see it in the theater instead of on Netflix at home, just because I would have preferred that experience. But they've screwed up. There are so many industries. We're seeing that with like Casper and Purple and these mattress companies where it's like, oh yeah, no, it's not at all profitable to sell a mattress for like $1,000 less than you get them in store and then mail them. And then when you return them, they're just like, keep it. Not profitable. Streaming, not really profitable. It was probably okay when Netflix was doing it because it was just one company and everybody was subscribing to them. Maybe that was profitable. But to be like your own studio, you don't do pilots anymore. You spend hundreds of millions of dollars creating a crap show because nobody bothers to test with a pilot. It's just, we've seen time after time that the way we were doing things before, while not perfect, is probably better and supported these more original ideas.
Okay, so couple of points to what you said. Number one, what can we do about it? We need Elon Musk to get involved in making movies because he doesn't give a shit. He will risk. He will do risky things because he believes in whatever it is. Not that, and that's an outlandish idea, I know. But I like him, and I like the fact that he is someone who says what he believes and takes risks, and he doesn't, like, if it makes money, great. If it doesn't, okay, so be it. He's not worried about that. The other thing is what you were describing, looking at if you throw in this kind of character or do this joke, it equates to this much, bump in revenue or whatever. That reminded me of the movie that came out with Brad Pitt a number of years ago called Moneyball. And that's what that was about. What they did, they said, we're not going to do what everybody else has done with, trying to make a winning baseball team because we think this player and this player and this player, and these are these specific individuals because that's what we're going to build up a team. And no, we're looking at nothing but stats. It's all about the stats and how do we work the numbers. That's what Hollywood, it feels like, is now becoming. It's just, I think you're 100% right that they're just working the numbers, and that's all it is. And it's one of the biggest problems, I think, with that right now is when they try to gain a following or get hype for a movie solely based on name recognition. Like one of the most recent ones we've seen was the Snow White fiasco with the actress and the things that were said and what they were doing. And okay, so if you hate the original story and you think it's super outdated and you didn't like it, why are you doing it? Why not just make a new movie? Oh, right. It's because by using this name that's one of the most iconic names in all of the original Disney classic movies, that you can make money on that solely based on the name. And I don't like that. I don't like that we're doing that now. I think it's a disgusting thing to do. When I don't mind that you want to do something new. I don't mind that you don't have to like the old stuff. And if you have a new idea and you think your new idea is worthwhile, and the ideas that you are going to espouse in that new idea, you've got good ideas for characters, for plot, the story, the whatever it is that is, then do it. Then make those movies. But don't rip off names of things that worked years ago just for the sole purpose of cashing in on it, even though what you're making isn't any, it looks nothing like the original that you are, trying to remake.
I think it might be okay because you had like Snow White and the Huntsman with Kristen Stewart and Chris Hemsworth.
Yep.
But that was a different story.
Mm-hmm.
It was like they reworked it and it was very different. It was supposed to be like almost realistic since they were doing it in live action. But Disney just remakes the original story and they try to do it beat for beat, but they change things. Like some things don't work in live action. Most of their live action is CG. And then with this, they were saying, I mean, they weren't saying it, but they were hinting like, oh, all of his stuff could get, and the prince is not the hero and all this stuff. And it's like, well, how does the original story work? I mean, it's based off of, fairy tale that's super old. So of course it has traditional gender roles and things like that. So it's like you're saying, why make it the live action adaptation if it's not an adaptation? You could make it some kind of alternate story with a different character name or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're trying to tell a different story, that you could do Snow White, whatever, subtitle, secondary title.
Got you.
But as the adaptation, I mean, I don't like any of the adaptations. I've watched pieces of them. It's like I don't care. I just don't care. It's
the Jungle Book was good. That redone one, Jon Favreau was the one who directed it. It was one of the, maybe not the first, but it was one of the very first of those Disney remake ones. I actually liked it better than the original cartoon. I really, really, really enjoyed it. I believe I have it in my DVD collection.
The Jungle Book wasn't one of my favorites when I was a kid anyway, but a lot of them, I feel like just people our age, like I saw Aladdin in the theaters.
Me too.
And it's like, is the new one really necessary? Like, it just feels weird. Like, it's weird not having Donny Osmond sing for Aladdin. Like, it feels wrong. Like, when you're a kid and you grew up with that stuff, it's like, it feels weird to have somebody else just sort of mimic it and re-release it as though they're doing it for the first time.
And I mean, I feel like in the Aladdin movie that we reviewed on Movie Howl, it's a podcast, not a video. We didn't stream it like this. So go check us out on Spotify or Google Podcast or Apple Cast, whatever. Go check it out. But
whatever's still around.
Yeah, whatever. I felt like they tried with that. Like I understand wanting to take something that reached our generation when we were kids, and wanting to reach the next generation of kids. It's a kids movie. You're trying to reach kids. Now, just like I mentioned in that review, I think they had an opportunity to do something different with this Aladdin story, like Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. Like, you could have potentially gone darker with the Aladdin story, and instead of try to make it just a remake of the Disney one, you could have done something interesting with it. But if you're going to redo that, I understand wanting to reach a new audience with it. It was just kind of a misfire. And it's really hard because, like you mentioned, Donny Osmond singing or Robin Williams voicing Genie, to recreate some of the things that you had from the original, it's really hard to do that. And I get it, but I at least felt like in that they tried. They did try to make it as a fun and entertaining, and they tried to do the original cartoon justice as much as they could. It just didn't really work the way they wanted it to. And so I can understand the idea of wanting to bring it to a new generation. But is it the job of the movie studio to do that, or is it the job of the parents to show these things to their children and say, hey, this was, I mean, because little kids are going to like it regardless. It doesn't have to be made now for them.
I mean,
thinking
Disney
it's good.
used to do that. You remember the Disney Vault? You remember those commercials?
Mm-hmm.
They'd be like, "Hey, we're releasing this from the vault," and I remember as even a kid being like, couldn't they just make these anytime? Like, why is it only for this select period that I can go to Kmart or Venture or whatever stores around back then and buy a tape of Pinocchio? Like, why do they create this artificial scarcity? And it's probably for that, so that they can just like reintroduce these things and then they can make the money off of the merchandising and everything all over again. But with streaming, they can't do that anymore. I mean, they could come out with something, they could do an ad and be like, hey, you remember all these classic movies? They're already on the streaming service you probably forgot that you're subscribed to. Thank you for the money, by the way.
Yeah.
But the old way worked better.
I mean, it worked, but it didn't make the shareholders enough money. And that's really what all of this comes down to.
It seems like they did, because like Snow White's 80 years old, and they didn't bother remaking it beat for beat until recently.
That's true. And I mean, given the ones and the failures of some of these remakes, and yet they're still continuing to do it, I don't know how these studios can't be learning their lessons when they make some of these movies and they are trying to change them, or even when they're not trying to change them and it just doesn't. It's trying to catch lightning in a bottle again. That's what they're trying to do. And it's really, really hard to do that. And that's okay. Excuse me. That's the question. Is it harder to catch lightning in a bottle again when you remake something like this? Or is it harder to catch lightning in a bottle because you tried something new? Which of those two things, when you're looking at the numbers game, like you mentioned a little bit ago, number-wise, what's harder to do and what pays off more? I would prefer to see try new things. Like there's too many books I've read. There's too many characters that I know of. Too many things that are already out there that there is an audience for it, but you would have to potentially have people who really love the source material, like really appreciate it, to bring it to light in a way that does the material justice and is profitable, because everybody else who watches it and takes in that media appreciates it because of how you've done it. Like people who never read Lord of the Rings and then they went and saw Lord of the Rings. It was so well done. You didn't have to have read the books to appreciate what they did. Did it help? Absolutely. Especially with the extended editions. But there's too much out there that could still be used. Like, I think an example of when they just tried to do that recently was the Wheel of Time series on Prime, which my buddy Jeremiah, he had read all of them. He's a big fan of that series. He got me into it a little bit. I read like the first 3, maybe 4 books, but I just couldn't commit more. I tried. I couldn't commit more than that. It was too much.
I thought about it, but I had already, before those came to my attention, I had read however many of the Song of Ice and Fire books were out. And then just years and years and years and empty promises and all that went by. And it's like, he's never finishing these books. I spent so much time reading these, and none of these mysteries are ever going to be like, they were great, but these are never going to be answered. And it's like, do I really want to start another? Like, I'm kind of done with fantasy stuff right now, and I've just never bothered to pick them up.
Like George R.R. Martin, he's never finishing the Game of Thrones books, and the Song of Ice and Fire. I'm sorry, let's be accurate here. But even if he did, even if for some miracle the last book comes out and he finishes it, I'm not rereading all of those things.
No, doesn't he?
The last one again.
I think there's 2 more that are supposed to come out.
I have no idea. No idea. 1 more, 2 more. I don't know. But I'm not doing it. I'm not rereading all of them. I got too many other things that I want.
Yeah, I don't remember anything. It's like I read like 4 or 5, like 450 page on average books, or however long. Like they were long.
Oh, they were super long.
I guess it depends on the print, like the size of the version you get or whatever. But it's like
no, they
really long.
They were
a lot of that information is gone.
They were super complex in like the houses and the families and all the crap that was going on.
Yeah, the interactions and the
there
clues
was so
and
much
mysteries.
That I felt if another book or 2 came out, I would have to reread all of them in order to be able to appreciate what I was reading or even understand what I was reading in the last books. And I'm not doing that.
Yep.
So there's too much, in my opinion, that could be done. Too many characters that I know of, or stuff that I don't know of. That there's people out there who come up with new ideas every single day, who have things that they may like to try, characters that they have been working on for years, and could potentially be amazing. Like eventually, or at one point, there wasn't a Rocky. Before there was a Luke Skywalker. Before there was, Gru from Despicable Me. Before there were these characters,
Indiana Jones.
There weren't. They weren't there. And then somebody said, "Oh, I want to do this, and I want to make this story, and I want to tell this story." And all these movies turned into these big things, but instead of now trying to do something new and maybe seeing where that new thing will take you, no. If we're a studio and we're gonna throw our money at it, we got to make sure to make that money back. It's not like I don't understand that, but
it's one of those things because of the way they release everything now. Not only does it have to make its money, it has to make it really fast.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 weeks of exclusivity in the theaters, and already like 70% of people are not going to go because they'll just wait to watch it on streaming.
Yeah, this is COVID really changed Hollywood. It really changed the way movies happen, the way we go see them, why we go see them, and it's never going to be the same.
I think it's that, but it's streaming.
And
the way they changed it, and they didn't change it back, and they should. Yeah. I mean, it just movies don't feel special anymore. Marvel stuff especially doesn't feel special. It used to be. I mean, it's so long ago. I was a teenager when the first Iron Man came out, I think. Yeah, I think I was still in my late teens. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It makes me sad to think about. But it's one of those things where it was like every 2 years something would come out, and it's like, oh, how did they do this? It's like, I wasn't into Iron Man. I didn't give a shit about Iron Man. He was a B-list hero. But it's like, oh, that looks really good. Like that looks way better than the goofy suit they used to have on the, in the comics that I had when I was a little kid. Like that I inherited from my brother when he was just like done with shit. And it's like, here, take this old crap. I don't want it anymore.
That's how I read a lot of comic books right there.
It's that's how I got like my, that's why I had Doctor Strange comics and things like that, was because I would just get whatever my brother cast off. Like, well, I'm not like reselling this, so here you go. Yeah, it was a special thing, and it was a social experience. Like I've talked about before, going to see The Dark Knight Returns, right? Or no, just The Dark Knight. That one was the one that was more impactful. People were more excited about that than the third one. That was the one where me and a bunch of my friends went to a midnight showing, and then we all wound up going to Denny's afterward because it was one of the only places open, and the place was jam-packed with people who had just come out of it, and we're all like just buzzing.
Yeah, and I guarantee the staff there had no idea that was happening, and they got boned.
Yeah, probably.
They're like, all of a sudden, they're like, "There's 2 of us. What's going on?"
But it was an awesome experience. There's so much along with it. Even movies that I didn't care to see, like Twilight, I went and saw those with girls, and I remember just like, again, midnight showing. Already have tickets, just like sitting there in the hallway on the ground. I look up and there's like another guy who's like gives me this knowing nod, like, yeah, I'm here as well. I know what this feels like. And it's like, I read the books because for some reason, some of my friends in high school convinced my mother at some point, like, I don't know if they ran into a Walmart or whatever, but my mom was like, "Oh, your friend so and so said that I should get you these." And it's like, I read them because I had them. Like anything somebody buys me, I will read, no matter how bad it is.
Noted.
But yeah, if you want to indoctrinate me, just give me your propaganda. I'll read it. I don't care. But it's like I read them all, and it's like, these are they're kind of garbage, but there's a place for it. But it's like I don't want to be at this movie. I don't want to be part of this. This is not my energy. But it's
describing was one of my favorite things about going to the movies when a big release was coming out. Like if you could say Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, even some of the Marvel stuff at one point, where people would get dressed up. And
yes, I remember
it would be this community thing. Like you don't know anybody. You got your friends, but you don't know any of these people in line. And yet there's this whole feeling of community, which brought us all together. And that's a good thing. Bringing people together versus what a lot of I believe is happening right now, which is pushing people apart, which is bad. Bringing people together is a good thing. And movies used to be one of the things that did that.
Even if it was bad.
Yep.
Like like some of the Twilight movies or whatever, it's like you walk out and it's like, well, that was a thing.
But at least it
didn't used to be a thing, but now,
and then you come out together and you're like, we sat through that shit show together. All right,
1,000-yard stare as you came out of the Phantom Menace. And you're like, what was that? Why did we go see that? I can't believe my brother made me go with him for this. Like, and now people love those movies because in comparison, they're like Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Like versus Rise of Skywalker with Ray Palpatine.
It's like, does that happen with movies anymore? Where like in the next Star Wars movie gets released and you see a bunch of people in line for the midnight show when they're all dressed up as Jedi and Sith and they have all these characters, or does that even a thing anymore?
Like, I doubt it. The last time I remember seeing it was I think the Batman movies, Dark Knight and then Dark Knight Returns. There were people dressed up. I mean, they didn't even dress up necessarily as characters. They were in the movie. Like I remember seeing girls dressed up as Poison Ivy or whatever, like Harley Quinn, something like that at the midnight showings. At Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, there were guys with the hat and like a rope or whatever as a whip because they weren't allowed to come in with a real whip. But I haven't seen that in a long time.
Yeah, and that's too bad because that was one of the most fun things about the theater for those of us who did it on a regular basis. Which in my late teens and early 20s, every single weekend, my friends and I were at the theater. It was something you could afford to do, number one, that you could without killing your bank account. And it was just what we did. There was no other option with these. There wasn't streaming service. There wasn't. You didn't have other ways to watch the same things. It was like being able to go to a Blockbuster movie or Blockbuster video with your family on a Friday night, picking out the new release that you hadn't seen in the theater. Oh, we're going to watch this now. And experiences like that aren't the same anymore. And nowadays, with a streaming service, if a highly anticipated thing comes out, but they don't release all of the episodes at one time, people are pissed off. Oh, you mean I got to wait? What? Like, nobody wants to wait for anything. There's no delaying gratification. I want it all right now, in my face, right now, without question. And that's the way it is. But the things that we're kind of referring to with this, and boy, this has been one hell of a tangent off of Wolfman. Ooh.
Yeah, no kidding. I think this was pent up. We needed.
It is. We haven't talked in a minute. It was my favorite thing about the movies. Going there with my friends, especially to midnight and big releases, that we would take the time to do it. We did, like, I remember doing it at times when I had to work in the morning. And we were like, I'm not missing this. Like, we're doing it. I don't care. Like, I'll suffer the next day. That's what you do when you're young. You suffer. If somebody asked me to do that now and I had to work in the morning, nope. I'll see it later. I don't need
I did one or two in grad school where it's like I either had to attend a class or teach a class the next day. It's like, I'm just gonna do it. It'll be fine. I'll sleep after.
Exactly. I'll sleep. I can sleep when I'm dead.
There are just a lot of social experiences that we don't get with movies anymore because of the way it is. Because everybody's just isolated in their houses watching this stuff, or apartments, or whatever it is. That, like, you don't go to even like the grocery store. Like, I remember going to the grocery store and they had the little movie rental thing. And it's like, oh, Mom, what's the Cable Guy? Can we rent that? No, you can't. What's Hellraiser? No, you can't. It's like, okay, what about the Naked Gun? No. It's like, all right. What can we do? She's like, Aladdin again?
Aladdin again. There you go. Oh, look, the Disney Vault released some stuff. And even the theater experience right now is different. I know they're trying to keep up now that we've got projectors and these big TVs. You can have like a 70-inch TV for like $300. Is it the best one? Probably not. But you've got these experiences in your house that, again, back when we were young and doing these things that we're referring to, we didn't have the options of that. You didn't have 55, 65, 85-inch televisions in your house. That wasn't unless you're like super wealthy, that wasn't the thing. You didn't do that. But nowadays, because the theater has to compete with that experience, the experience in the theater is different. Sitting in these big loungy things and you recline and they're heated, but it's not like the old movie seats when you're all right up next to each other and you're all there and you're experiencing it together, and it's just different than it used to be. Even though I would still appreciate, even with the way the movie theater itself is set up now, the experience, if that could still be somewhat similar, the camaraderie, the socialization, everything that bringing people together, I can still appreciate that side of it. But like everything is part of it. Like even the old seats, the way it was, where you're just like next to each other, it made a difference. That somebody who you're sitting next to, you're watching this thing that you both came to the midnight show, and this moment, and somebody dies or some major thing happens, and you're like, it is different in the way that you experience it like that. So it's a little, this is basically just us reminiscing, because there's very limited possibility that it'll ever get back to that. It's something, it's like malls. Like I'm going here towards the middle-ish end of August, and we're going to go up north to go to Mall of America, because never gone, I've always wanted to. And I grew up with malls. I grew up in malls, and I really like the whole mall thing, but that's not a thing anymore. It's just, they don't have those anymore. And once those things are gone, they're just gone. And so here, this is our PSA, Halligans. Try to appreciate what you have when you have it. Live in the moment. Maybe put your phone down. Like, there are going to be things that you think are going to go on forever, that I'm going to continue to be able to go see movies and go to midnight shows, do it. Stuff goes away. You don't get to continue to do stuff, and you're going to look back on it with, rose-colored glasses for some of it. But you're going to have good memories of it. But that's all they're ever going to be, because you cannot recreate that anymore. There's no way to really, every now and again, you might get a glimpse of it. Something that almost scratches the surface of what it used to be. Yeah. And that's every generation, I think, goes through that. And this is the one for us. So take your time, enjoy what you have, appreciate what you have, and, appreciate enjoying it with friends and family that you care about, because that's really what makes it meaningful. That I got to go do that with all my friends, or that all the movies I got to go watch with my dad, because my mom, that's why we had, she always said, that's why we had boys, so that your dad had somebody to go watch movies with, because she be a part of it.
Or like with my bar, one of the things that came close was when I was running that bar, I did a showing of Tron Legacy that I just did for free. And like all the guys who worked at the bigger comic book shop down the road came to it. Like just a bunch of people showed up, like specifically for that. Like we did it on a normal night. Like we didn't close it off for that or anything, but there were a lot of people who showed up. Like they had pizza. They had emos or whatever with them. They were like ready to go. I mean, they were there on time. They're walking around talking about it. Like I remember hearing a couple of guys being like, "Oh, I forgot how gorgeous this movie was," or whatever. Like how great this soundtrack is. And it was a really good social experience. But to bring it back to the Wolfman, this is a perfectly adequate movie. And that's something we kind of need to be okay with again, is being adequate. Like not everything has to be $1 billion hit.
Correct.
If we could find a way to reduce budgets a little bit, or just bring back the old theatrical release with some time period that is exclusive. I mean, I'm unsubscribing from a lot of streaming services because they've just gotten crazy. Like I was paying way more for streaming services than I ever paid for normal linear TV. It's just, man.
And
I don't want cable back,
but it's not the end all be all. It's just not.
Yeah, and especially when a lot of the movies don't come out on it. It's like, oh, and I need 3 different streaming services to see all the seasons of whatever show I want to watch. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. They had it figured out pretty well for a while, and then COVID screwed everything up. I mean, that's kind of the whole. I've been thinking about that. Like, what will I tell my daughter when she's like 16, 17, kind of old enough to start like forming a real worldview? She's like, Dad, what happened to the world? And I'd be like, well, it all started in 2016 with this gorilla. And it just all went downhill from there.
Rip Harambe. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I actually am going to echo that sentiment as well. Being okay with things being adequate. Everything can't be a home run. Every time you step up to the plate, you cannot hit a home run. But base hit after base hit after base hit after base hit, that wins your ball game. Like movie studios, have just good movies. That you don't need to have one movie that makes your entire year and then everything else can flop and you don't care. No, how about just a bunch of consistent things that, one of them could be, maybe it's amazing, some gem that came out of nowhere that you didn't expect, but that can't happen if you don't try new things. And so it's okay if something is adequate. Sometimes it's just fun to sit down and throw some popcorn in your face and enjoy a movie. That's all I plan to do when I go see Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm not looking for something that's going to revive. Oh my God, I'm a super big Marvel fan again. And no, I just want to go sit down, enjoy some popcorn, enjoy some friends if anybody decides to come with us, and enjoy a movie. That's it. That's all. Just a little entertainment for the time period at which I'm going to sit there. That's all I'm looking for. So,
all right,
we still have to answer
place to end it. Oh,
Wolfman.
Is it a watch?
Watch or not a watch?
I would say a watch.
Yeah, it's a watch.
I enjoy. I mean, just for Anthony Hopkins alone, I think it's enough.
Anthony Hopkins is
Emily,
good. I've always liked
Emily
Del Toro.
I like Emily Blunt.
She's great.
I feel like Benicio del Toro. His performance isn't great, but he's fine.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I don't know. I don't know what it was. Something about his performance was a little flat for a lot of it, but it's whatever. It's like he's the least important part of it. It's like the werewolf part of him is more important. Anthony Hopkins is amazing.
As always. That's what he does. He can't help but bring his A game every time.
Yeah, he doesn't know how to do anything else.
That's right. Sir Anthony Hopkins. That's how he earned that. He earned that, sir. All right, Holligans. Thanks once again. We ranted and rambled on. So if you made it to the end of the video, like gold star for you. Straight up, you earned it. Hope you enjoyed yourselves. Do all the things. Like, subscribe, bell, whatever, comment, all that crap. Do all that, whatever. Email us, moviehowl@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. And if you want us to watch and review something, we will do it. If you email us, or if you comment in here, hey, review this. Oh, watch this movie. I thought it was really underrated, and let me know what we'll watch it. I guarantee it. If you let us know, we will do it. We might regret it. I mean, so you might ruin our night. I don't know. Like make us watch like 8mm or something. It might ruin your night. But I hope you enjoyed. We always enjoy. And any parting thoughts, Ryan? Always. I don't want to not give you your shot.
Nope, just perfectly adequate. It's funny you mentioned 8mm, which is about the same age.
No, it had to be older than this movie. No, there was original 8mm with Nicolas Cage way back.
Oh, you're right, 1999.
Yeah, well, yeah, for sure. I knew it was older than that.
Wasn't there a newer one called 8mm?
I think they did do a newer one. I agree. But no, the original one was definitely way back from that. But Halligans, this has been great. We always enjoy ourselves. And as always, I've been Joe.
I've been Ryan.
We're out.